All right, so today we're going to be diving deep into a topic that you specifically requested,
Okay.
which is the hidden science of obesity.
Right.
We're going beyond just like the calories in, calories out kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
it should get pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a topic that's, I think a lot of people have misconceptions about even in the medical community.
Yeah, for sure. Our guide for this deep dive is a YouTube video by Dr. Mike Hansen, who's a board-certified MD.
Okay.
And his video is called The Biggest Reason Obese People Can't Lose Weight. And it's gotten a lot of engagement, a lot of comments, a lot of likes.
Yeah, and it's pretty provocative. And it does challenge a lot of the narratives that we hear.
Totally. So to start off, we got to start with BMI.
Sure.
So everybody knows BMI.
Right.
You know, it's the elephant in the room. But is that really the best way to measure obesity?
So it's a starting point. But I would say that if you're just using BMI to define obesity, that's like judging a book by its cover.
Right.
Because you're missing a lot of information about what's going on inside. You can have a seemingly healthy BMI, but have dangerous levels of visceral fat. And that's what we call TOFI. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside.
Wow, TOFI. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
So somebody could be walking around thinking they're healthy.
Right.
Based on their BMI, but really not be healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, you have MHO, metabolically healthy obesity. And these are individuals that may be classified as obese based on BMI, but all their metabolic markers are actually quite good.
Okay. So it's way more nuanced than just a number.
For sure.
Okay. Now, Dr. Mike, in the video, he says that like 85% of obese individuals develop it because of insulin resistance.
Right.
So what's the connection there?
So think of insulin as the key that unlocks your cells to let glucose in for energy. And insulin resistance is when those locks get rusty.
Yeah.
So the key doesn't work as well. So then glucose builds up in the bloodstream. And your body starts storing that as fat.
So even if somebody's, eating what they think is a quote-unquote normal amount,
right,
their body could actually just be storing more of it as fat.
Exactly.
Because of this resistance.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think it shifts the focus from this idea of willpower to actually looking at, genetics, epigenetics, and early environment. And Dr. Mike actually argues that those are the true drivers of our predisposition to obesity.
Hold on, epigenetics. Isn't that like beyond our genes? What does that have to do with our environment?
So think of your genes as the blueprint. And epigenetics is like the contractor. Who's making decisions on the building site? Your environment, and this includes everything from what your mother ate during pregnancy to your childhood exposures, can actually switch genes on or off, or even dim their intensity. And this has a lasting impact on your metabolism and how your body stores fat.
So some people are just starting out with like a faulty blueprint.
Potentially, yeah.
And it's not really their fault.
Right.
And that would be so frustrating if you're trying to lose weight,
Absolutely.
But you feel like you just can't.
It's an uphill battle. And then it gets even more complex when you consider what Dr. Mike calls obesogens, which are molecules in our environment. That can disrupt our hormonal system and contribute to weight gain.
Wait, so you're saying that there's things that are in our food, that are in our everyday products, that can actually make us gain weight?
They can.
Regardless of how much we're eating or exercising.
It's not just about calories in, calories out.
That sounds crazy.
It might, but the science is there.
Wow.
So these obesogens act like hormonal imposters. They can mimic or block key players like insulin and leptin, which are the hormones responsible for regulating appetite and fat storage.
So our bodies are getting like false signals.
Yeah, you could think about it that way.
And that's leading us to gain weight.
Potentially.
Even when we're doing everything right.
Exactly.
That's so unfair.
And what's particularly concerning is that exposure to certain obesogens during critical periods of development, like in the womb or early childhood, can actually have lifelong impacts on your metabolism and fat storage.
Yeah.
And set the stage for obesity later in life.
So it's not just about what we're exposed to now. It's what our mothers were exposed to when they were pregnant with us.
Exactly.
And even what we encountered when we were kids.
That's right. So it does kind of highlight the need to take a more generational approach to addressing obesity.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the individual. It's about the environment that they were raised in.
Yeah. It's like almost like a conspiracy against our waistlines.
Well, maybe not a conspiracy, but certainly a web of factors.
Yeah.
That go far beyond simple willpower or making quote-unquote better choices.
Yeah.
It's a whole new way of looking at obesity.
Totally.
Yeah.
Wow, this is really making me rethink everything I thought I knew about obesity.
Yeah.
It's not even just about willpower, it's about genetics, epigenetics.
Right.
Even these obesogens in the environment. It's a lot.
It's complex.
Yeah.
And speaking of challenges, one of the biggest hurdles, even with breakthroughs, like GLP-1 agonists that we've talked about, is really access and affordability. These medications can be incredibly effective, but they're often priced out of reach for a lot of people who could really benefit.
Yeah, it's we're so close to a solution, but then these barriers are holding us back. It's frustrating.
Absolutely.
But I want to go back to the obesogens for a second. Yeah. So you said they're hormonal imposters. They mimic or block hormones like insulin and leptin.
Right.
Can you break that down? How do they actually do that?
So think about it this way. Your hormones are like finely tuned instruments in an orchestra. And each one plays a specific role in maintaining harmony in the body. And obesogens are like someone sneaking in and playing the wrong notes, and it ends up disrupting the whole symphony. So for example, some obesogens can mimic the action of insulin, and they can trick your body into storing more glucose as fat, even if you're not overeating.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just about the calories you're consuming.
So our bodies are getting these false signals.
You could think about it that way.
And that's making us gain weight.
Potentially. Yeah.
Even when we're doing everything right.
Exactly.
It's so unfair.
And what's particularly concerning is that exposure to certain obesogens during critical periods of development, like in the womb or in early childhood, can have lifelong impacts on your metabolism and fat storage.
Wow.
Yeah.
So not just what we're exposed to now, but what our mothers were exposed to when they were pregnant.
Right.
And what we encountered when we were kids.
Exactly. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it kind of highlights the need to take a more holistic and generational approach. When we think about addressing obesity, because it's not just about the individual, it's about, the environment that they were raised in and exposed to.
Okay, so knowledge is power. But where do we even begin?
Right.
These obesogens are everywhere.
They are.
BPA in plastics, pesticides in our food, chemicals in our personal care products.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
But awareness is the first step.
Okay.
So start by reading labels, choosing BPA-free containers, opting for organic produce when possible, looking at the ingredients in your personal care products. Every little choice makes a difference.
It's like a treasure hunt for these obesogens.
Yeah, you could think about it that way.
And I imagine supporting companies that prioritize transparency and clean ingredients is important. Voting with our wallets. And I think we can also not underestimate the power of collective action. We can advocate for stricter regulations. When it comes to obesogens in our food production and consumer products, support research initiatives that shed more light on this topic. Engage in open and honest conversations about obesity, breaking down the stigma, and promoting a more nuanced understanding of this really complex issue.
I like that. Moving away from shame and blame and towards understanding and support. But even with individual action and policy changes, we can't totally escape our genetic and epigenetic predispositions.
That's true.
Are we just stuck with our family history?
Well, that's a question that I think a lot of researchers are grappling with. And while you can't change your genes, there is emerging research that suggests that there may be ways to influence how those genes are expressed through lifestyle interventions like diet, exercise, stress management, even exposure to nature.
So even if we're dealt a bad hand genetically, we still have some control.
Yeah, I think so.
Over how those cards are played? That's good.
Yeah.
But what about those new weight loss drugs, the GLP-1 agonists?
Yeah.
Could those be a game changer?
I think they have immense potential, especially for individuals who are struggling with obesity-related health issues. These medications work by mimicking hormones that regulate appetite and promote weight loss. And they've shown really impressive results in clinical trials, not only in helping people shed pounds, but also improving blood sugar control, lowering blood pressure, boosting overall metabolic health.
That sounds amazing. Are there any downsides?
Like any medication, there are potential side effects. The most common ones that have been reported are nausea and some gastrointestinal issues, which tend to subside over time. But then, of course, as we've talked about, cost is a significant barrier. These medications are expensive, and insurance coverage is often limited. So it does raise some concerns about equity and access and, potentially widening the gap between those who can afford these treatments and those who can't.
Right. So it's great that we have these breakthroughs, but if they're not accessible to everybody,
exactly,
then it's not really a solution.
So I think when we think about addressing the obesity epidemic, we need a multi-pronged approach that tackles not only the biological and environmental factors, but also the socioeconomic disparities that contribute to health inequities.
Yeah, it's about making a world where everybody has a chance to thrive, no matter what their genetics are or where they live.
Exactly.
But even with all these advancements, the new medications, lifestyle interventions, policy changes, obesity is still a really complex and challenging issue.
It is.
So where do we go from here? What's next? We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. You know, obesogens, new medications, but like, where do we go from here?
That's a great question.
What's next?
I think the answer lies in embracing complexity. You know, we've moved beyond this simplistic idea of calories in, calories out, and we're starting to appreciate how intricate this interplay of genetics, epigenetics, environment, and even the microbiome is.
A microbiome, that's like all the bacteria in our gut, right?
Exactly.
What does that have to do with obesity?
So it's a burgeoning area of research. But we're finding that the gut microbiome has a really profound impact on how we metabolize food, how we regulate hormones, and even how we store fat. Some studies are suggesting that certain gut bacteria might predispose individuals to weight gain, while others might actually protect against it.
So, like, could manipulating the microbiome through diet or probiotics be like a new frontier in treatment?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, imagine if we were able to personalize dietary recommendations or even develop these microbial therapies that were targeted based on an individual's unique gut profile.
That sounds like sci-fi.
It does.
Kind of like how the obesogens sounded like sci-fi.
Right, exactly. The science is always evolving. So what seems far-fetched today could be commonplace tomorrow. And that's why it's so important to, stay curious, question assumptions, and really embrace the unknown.
And speaking of the unknown, you left us at the end of last segment with a question about prioritizing healthy development of kids from the very beginning. What did you mean by that?
Well, we've learned that these early life exposures, both in the womb and during childhood, can have a profound impact on our health, including our predisposition to obesity. So if we can create these supportive environments that nurture healthy habits from the earliest stages of life, we could potentially break the cycle of obesity and set future generations up for success.
So it's about going beyond just individual responsibility.
Right.
It's more like a collective responsibility.
It is.
To make a world where health isn't about luck, it's a right.
Exactly. It's about investing in early childhood education, ensuring access to nutritious food, creating these safe and stimulating environments, and just promoting healthy lifestyles.
That's a big undertaking.
It is a big task.
Yeah, but it sounds like a really important one. So what can our listeners do to help with that vision?
Well, I'd say start by becoming informed. Educate yourself about the science of obesity and share what you learn with others. Support organizations that are working to create these healthier environments for children and families. Advocate for policies that promote access to healthy food and quality health care. And most importantly, be a role model for the young people in your life. Make healthy choices, stay active, and cultivate a positive relationship with food and your body.
I love that. It's a good reminder that we can all do something
On
to help,
your future.
not just for us, but for everybody.
For generations to come.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure diving deep into this topic with you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. So keep questioning, keep learning, and keep taking action together. We can make a difference.